very much, Claire. That's, one of the things I'm going to be talking about is being in the moment and coming from this place, the heart place. And thank you for giving me a little tweak here, which has set me up. And now I'm just going to be in the moment, ground myself, and we'll begin. I was listening to everybody talking there. The word that came up a lot was clarity, and that's good because I think when I was preparing all of this and thinking about, think about your audience, I think what I'm really about and what we're going to talk about today is this busy mind, and sort of how many thoughts are going round and round and round all day long, and being able to cut through some of that and get some mental clarity. So that's really going to be, that's a really nice way to tee it up, and if we get some enlightenment along the way, then that will be not so much my fault, but whatever comes through me, I think. In terms of starting, I was going to start with a Steve Jobs quote. And what Steve Jobs said was, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. So that gets quite a lot in there. Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Now, as Claire said, I call myself a life balance coach, and one of the things that I see as really important in terms of balance is this aspect of you've got the rational mind and you've got your intuition, and you've also got, you've got your head and you've got your heart. And I think, certainly for my own life, I've experienced a whole load of imbalance between those two aspects. So if I sort of share a little bit about my background, I grew up, and I'm going to kind of go into the rational London world, very strong academic career, went to Cambridge University and lived in my head and spent a huge amount of energy in my head. Did well, high achievement and so on, but it was very kind of energy draining. And about 3 years ago, I went to India. I'm Anglo-Indian by background, and I connected to this kind of Indian side of me. And what sort of happened from that point was I started meditating, and I started getting more in touch with my intuition. The intuition was there, but it accelerated. And I think some of the rational kind of over-processing started to calm down. I think when I think sometimes, okay, I've got this kind of East and West blend, I think of the West sometimes as having quite a sort of reverence for what's going on in the what I would call rational mind, and it's a balance thing. So perhaps the West could get a bit more intuition, and in the East they're actually quite heavy on going with the heart and using lots of intuition. Actually, if they sometimes could become maybe a bit more rational, that might help their balance. I think also I was talking to some women before this, and sometimes I think women have particularly developed intuitions and so on. So it's just a question of balance. But also I think in terms of any definitions, I don't want to get too into definitions, because I think our rational minds might want to kind of unpick and start analysing that. Whereas I think on a heart level and on a gut level, you probably know what I'm getting at anyway, and we're going to work our way through it. But in terms of the, as I was saying, I think of the intuition and the heart as being, in one way, think of it as it has a knowledge of our highest good. What we and our highest good ultimately would be, when we're happiest. Simple as that. If we've got joy, if we've got happiness, we're in our highest good. And the heart and the intuition tend to know where that is. Like Steve Jobs says, it already knows where we want to go. That will give us that deep sort of connection. In terms of definition of a rational mind, I sometimes think of it as if I had a calculator I just wanted to pull out of my pocket and do a quick few sums. I was talking to someone after the gathering last week, and we were talking about, if you want to go and buy a car, you might want to just suddenly have a few different things in mind. So, okay, I'm going to need a car for 3 years, I'm going to need a car for 10 years, I'm going to need it for the kids, I'm going to need it for just to take a girlfriend out. You're going to make different rational decisions and start doing some calculations. But what I tend to feel is that the rational mind has kind of, rather than just being a calculator in our pocket, it's kind of gone and taken over our lives to a certain extent. And we're going to go into a certain aspect of, it has its place and it does lots of very useful things. But I think, when we talk about we're only using 10% of our mental capacity. I think the future lies a lot more in tapping into our intuition and really kind of going for it in a very much more energy efficient way. So that's kind of an introduction. If we go into some of the aspects, there's a couple of key aspects of the mind and how it works I'm going to sort of discuss. One is we have 60,000 thoughts a day on average, and 60–70% of those, actually 70% of those are typically negative. 60,000 thoughts a day, 70% of them are negative on average. So pretty much everyone in the room, and you know, I get negative thoughts, they're just whizzing around, and it leads me to think really, you know, how many of those thoughts are actually productive or leading to my highest good, or how many of them are maybe leading to anxiety or self-doubt, or you know, just they're going round and round in circles really. And also there is another stat which I think it's 95% of the 70% we just say the same every day. So we just kind of repeat the same old stuff. So in terms of productive thoughts, and also thoughts that resolve themselves, I think, you know, thoughts that just kind of go around and they don't actually get to a conclusion. I think that also happens a lot. So these are the kind of things that we're going to be dealing with. The other aspect of the mind is what I call the monkey mind. So the monkey mind likes to hop around, bounce around. Probably heard about this. Jumping into the past, jumping into the future, but very rarely actually being right in the present moment. And as I say that, it just reminds me actually, yeah, I can't just, you know, actually, you know, I just suddenly realised, this is one of the things we're going to come on to, being in the present moment, I suddenly noticed my shoulders were just a little bit tense there. And it was just a bit about, okay, slow down, be back in the moment, there's no rush to deliver this. And this is what the monkey mind was doing for me just then. It was probably going a little bit into the future, have you got enough time? Oh, they're really listening, blah, 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 now. we're all here and it's good. So, the one thing I want to start asking you guys about is just to, anyone just shout out any benefits that you think are in being in the moment other than what I just mentioned.
Enjoyment, feeling alive, connection.
Just feel light, very light, and sensory experience.
Peaceful. Appreciation.
Appreciation?
Yeah. Grounded.
It's nice, when I heard grounded, when I heard light, I felt grounded and the two sort of almost connected.
Better interaction.
The state of being and also non-attached. You're just non-attached in a nice, clean, clear state. So you're not emotionally feeling what's going on around you. You're connecting with everything, but you're not actually being influenced by it. You're absorbing, seeing everything and feeling it for what it is.
Clarity.
That's it.
Focus.
Clarity, focus. So a lot of these things that we were saying earlier on, we're looking for clarity, focus, and everything that I've heard, I think, you know, is all stuff that I've listed in the past. And I think we know this. So I think one of the things I'm going to come up to later on, I'm not going to mention this for a little while yet, but some techniques of just being able to just remember to be in the moment, because we've all, you know, this is not, I'm not going to be launching into rocket science tonight. It's going to be stuff that is so kind of, it will make sense, but it's just a reason to kind of practice it, or a toolkit to kind of roll out and give a given moment. I would like us to do an exercise next, and it's going to be a case of buddying up with somebody next to you. So if you can go into partners, probably just swivel and we'll work out who hasn't got a partner or whatever. But before you do that, the rules of the exercises, we're going to practice being in the moment. So I want you to just have that intention of being in the moment with the person you're going to be sat with. And the rules are, you're not allowed to talk about the past, you're not allowed to talk about the future, and you're not, something that we tend to do as well is we get very stuck into our identities. You're not allowed to say what you do for a living, where you live, or any of that stuff about, you know, because that's not who we are. We're something more than just where we live and what we do for a living. So if you can just have, you know, a two-way conversation, you don't have to kind of break up 1 minute, 1 minute. Within 2 minutes, and away you go, and I'll tell you in 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's good to let go of
How was it? Anyone want to share anything that they
or
experienced?
someone.
It's very hard to stick to the rules.
Did you, or did you feel like you went into it and then you thought,
Well, we thought it was going to be pretty easy, but suddenly we were talking about what had happened before to lead us to now. And it couldn't help it. It was very hard to have a rational conversation.
It's almost like
Right.
a yes and no game, you know, where you're not allowed to say yes and no, but obviously there's slightly different.
If you talk in theoreticals, it's not so much of a problem, like theories, because you're not actually talking, you're not focusing on yourself specifically, or events as such, you're just speaking in general terms. So that makes something that's obviously not specific to time, you know, like say, like that.
But you need a reference point from starting a conversation, and that's what was really hard. Because you was thinking past or future, you wanted to talk about it. That's what I found.
yeah, I was going to say before, and I don't need to, it can be quite unusual to do it as an exercise, and really the only point of the exercise is just to sort of bring some awareness of what is that thing about being in the moment and how sometimes quite strange it can feel to just suddenly be in that situation, and it's just to kind of mess around with your heads a little bit and just experience that. So thanks for doing that. I think just to kind of nail this being in the moment point, I think someone said it earlier on as well, that it's when you feel alive, and I think I kind of had a whole list of most people covered a lot of them earlier on, but being in the moment is where we're living. And there are grand concepts about the past and future illusions, and there is only ever the present moment. But really, that's actually let's do this as well. There's a teacher of mine who kind of likes to click his fingers, and if we just actually get into the moment. Did you notice actually, as soon as we did that a couple of times, I felt an energy shift in the room. It just suddenly just went, I think everybody's mental thing just sort of connected in some way. I felt it anyway. So,
I did too.
yeah. We're all one. Alright, I'm going to duck into some tips. I know people like tips. I want to kind of share as much as possible, but not deflect too much from a sort of core theme tonight. But so I'm not going to dwell on these too much. But a few tips for dealing with this kind of busy mind, 60,000 thoughts. One of the things, how many people have heard of morning pages? Put your hand up. Okay, I'll explain a bit about morning pages. So I do this every morning, and what it involves is literally getting a notebook and writing down 3 pages of what they call a stream of consciousness. So it's anything that's in your head. You don't actually, it's not writing in terms of I'm going to write this or write that. I'm just going to say whatever's in my head. And it's what happens is you're literally just dumping all this stuff out of your head and putting it on a piece of paper. You never, I ask someone to give me a smile every so often to remind me to smile. And he's giving me funny faces. So if I start cracking up
Was that
laughing-
you? 'Cause-
Oh.
oh no, I thought I saw you smiling at him.
So morning pages, this is good, because what it's about is cutting out the rational mind. Rational mind is always serious. This is about emptying. You know, I think sometimes, you know, if you've got an idea of 60,000 thoughts, I would say, if I'm a bit bold, there's a lot of that is junk. It's not really useful, and a lot of it's just going on and on. It's the same thing over and over. So first thing in the morning, if you can empty a load of that junk out, what happens is it clears a lot of space for during the day. Actually, you find a lot of inspiration just pops into your head because you haven't got the same circular things. The other thing that happens is you get really bored of yourself saying the same old thing every day, and it provides motivation to start making little shifts and little changes. And before you know it, you do this every day. You know, a few months later, you just start noticing a different motivation, a different desire to do something slightly differently. And honestly, I could do a whole workshop on morning pages, but it's a very, very powerful tool. If you're really serious, I mean, this title is How to Think Clearly, Get More Done. If you're really serious about thinking clearly in a day, morning pages I cannot recommend highly enough. And I'll tell you more about it down the path if you want. The other thing is, sometimes people feel like they haven't got time, maybe, because I wake up, I do 20 minutes before I even get out of bed. It is good to do when you're in that fuzzy mode, when you're just waking up, because you find that you actually wake up. By the time you've finished, you are actually more awake and you're ready for the day, and you've cleared yourself out, so you have a really nice shower and you can start singing instead of worrying about what's going to happen later on. But if you feel, God, I don't want to get up 20 minutes earlier than 6 already, whatever, maybe when you're on the way to work, if you're on the bus or on the tube or something, then, you know, whatever it takes, you know, I'm not going to start reading out instructions, but tip number 2 is what they call Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law dictates that we will get a task done in the amount of time we give ourselves to do it in. So if we say have a task and we say I'm going to give myself a week to do it, it will take a week. If you give yourself 2 weeks to do it, it will take 2 weeks. And if you don't give yourself a deadline to do it, it may just kind of not quite get done. Third tip is if you're, you know, like I was saying, you know, it's a busy London out there, there's increasing levels of chaos, whether it's the people on the bus or you know, just kind of your own head. So if you ever just want a quick way to just get centered, and let's just try this. If you just close your eyes for a moment, and I'm going to keep my notes so I can just talk you through it, but if you just close your eyes and just bring your awareness to the center of your chest. Just notice if there's anything happening to your mind. What often happens is the thoughts can start to just subside. And if you want, you can just open your eyes and I'll just keep talking. But yeah, it's just what you might find when you do that exercise is that you can, particularly if you do it and you've got a bit of time at home, emotion can come up in that space. And you know, I would say that sometimes, you know, rather than resisting emotion, you know, allow it to come up. If some sadness comes up, some anger comes up, allow it to come up. It will soon morph into something else, and then before you know it, you've processed a whole load of emotion, and it's another thing you're not having to carry around. So mainly today we're talking about, you know, getting mental clarity, but also emotional clarity can come from that practice as well. So I'm going to go back into what I was talking about in terms of mind. So we've thought about being in the moment.